Well, hey all, and welcome back. So today I have another retro review, and this is something I'd wanted for a while, and I was lucky and found on eBay. This is Cypher from Virtuon. Now, you all may know Kaiyodo for their Revoltech line, but before that they had a Xebec line, XEBEC, that was sort of these other figures that were sculpted by Yamaguchi, who I'm a huge fan of, and he did various anime, and he did this whole Virtuon series. Anyway, this is he does a really nice job with the sculpting. They are a little bit more idealized than I believe the game models were because of this line. I actually hunted down the game, and they were a little bit more, I'd say, reserved design-wise. But one thing that's cool, and I'm trying to zoom out here, these packages are really big compared to the figures, and the other things from this line I've actually gotten, the boxes are even bigger. It was kind of interesting that they distributed things this way, but try to show things, turn it sideways. You can see the title here, it's the DNA side, and maybe that's sort of like the old way of saying the Kai version, or however they're sort of doing toys these days with these more modernized styles where they've taken liberties. And talks about what it's from, and one of the nice things on here is it talks about who designed the character, who designed the package, as well as mentions the sculptor and character designer, package designer. I think it's nice that companies did that, or at least Kaiyodo did that. They gave credit to these guys for their work rather than just saying, "Oh, here's another product of ours. Enjoy." So anyway, on the back, it actually shows another version of this in the illustrations, where this one I have here is a translucent one, and I believe this one in the photos is more opaque. And there was a lot of variants that they had done to this line. So anyway, before I go on too much about this whole line, let me go ahead and get this guy out of the package and let's check him out. And so here we have it out of the package. And it is a very pointy figure. If you're familiar at all with this line, Yamaguchi used some really interesting ways of poseability. Now, one thing I need to note, this is a very fragile figure. When it was delivered to me, the first one I got was actually broken. And so I have two, which the seller had sent me his spare one so I could try to fix it. However, even though that one, so the one I'd gotten originally had a broken hand and this broken fin section, the other one actually has another broken fin section as well. So I'm going to try to repair it. All this translucent plastic gets somewhat brittle over time. However, while that is not really what's the flaw in this, even though the translucent plastic is a brittle thing to be concerned about, the biggest problem, and this is the same true with this whole line, you actually have to mess with these figures every now and then. They're plastic. What happens is, over time, these joints kind of fuse. And you have to sort of keep them loose by moving them every now and then, and that just keeps them from gluing shut. Now this one, all the joints on it, I'm going to pull them off the stand and show you guys, all the joints on him are actually pretty good. I went slow, I worked towards the base, and was actually able to get all the joints loose except for the hands. Now what I'm concerned about, especially considering that the hand is broken on the other one, is that the wrists are probably going to be fused in there. My best bet would be maybe taking a hairdryer and getting it warmed up enough to pull out. But even then, it may break, and I might have to drill out the old peg just to use one of the spare hands. I'm probably going to leave the hands alone, though. I would like to change them out, but I really don't want to risk it. Now, the design of this mech, or actually back to the articulation. Now, Yamaguchi, I mean, he has some of the basic things in here, but it's not as standard as you expect. Like the hip joints all move at an angle. They don't move on the vertical axis like you'd expect. But his work tends to have a very dynamic pose and look to it. The characters carry weight. This is why I'm actually a huge fan of his. Even though the joints may not be the most optimal design, they're there to create the best poses. And I think he did a great job with that. Though that did go away in the Revoltech line, it was something I really appreciated in the Xebec line. Now, you do have shoulder rotation, elbow or shoulder swivel, elbow, wrist, a waist joint, and the waist joint actually can be pulled up, and it gains more articulation, so you get more of this ab crunch in here. Head rotates. These wings rotate. This back opens, and all these Virtual On figures have the same feature. If you look here, it's a little Dreamcast. And when you open it up, there's a disc inside and the little reader. I feel like this disc was supposed to be on the bottom. I'll have to check my other figures. But that closes. This piece here does move, though of course the other one was broken off in the package. And then you have the hip movement, the knee, and even though it's a single joint, the knee is probably the best joint on here. Because when you move it forward, you have this great line that it produces here. It's very energetic. Now the one thing, and this is probably the worst part of the articulation, is the feet. They do have sort of the similar ball joint at the base is what it looks like. But because of this figure having all these pointy things poking off of it, it's just not very poseable. You can't do a whole lot with it. Now, you can get it to stand if you futz around with it a little bit, though it's not going to be the most stable. But none of the figures from the Virtual On line really are stable when it comes to standing. That's the reason they all have these nice stands. Plus, they have these nice jumping poses. But if you look at it, I'm not sure how well the camera's picking up. All this plastic here is translucent purple, so you can see that it shines through. And this is a nice design. I really do like it. The other one that's broken will probably end up a custom of some sort. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but what's probably going to have to happen, out of the two, this one had the least amount of problems. But the joints broken, or the peg's broken off in there, so I'm going to have to drill it out, and probably, so this one does still have a little bit of a peg, but I'll probably glue an extension onto it and put it on there. And what I might do is actually consider oiling the joints. Putting a little bit of some sort of lubricant on it, whether it be lithium grease or something like that that doesn't show up, just to keep these from fusing together. Now, let's go ahead and look at the other ones, just to give you guys an idea. Alright, so we got him on the stand here. And let's talk about accessories actually before we look at the other ones. Now, this line, even with the Evangelion figures, they had crummy instructions. I mean, they're just a little black and white sheet. It's actually a two-color sheet, but they just give you the basic idea of what you can do with the figure. It was useful to have, but half the time it didn't tell you a whole lot. We have this extension here. It's sort of, I guess, a beam that goes into the rifle, into the gun. So we've got that, and the arm can hold it up. Though this stand, one thing to note about this figure compared to the other figures in this line, all the pegs are very thin, and maybe that goes with its fragility. They're just not as robust as the other ones. We have three hands here. We've got this open hand here, which is actually a really nice design, and then we have two fists. And they're a combination of this dark gray gunmetal plastic and then the translucent purple. They look really nice. And then these little throwing stars. And what the instructions actually say is that they're meant for this hand, and you can put all three in there, but it's going to be a balancing act, and it's probably going to be something that's going to fall off all the time. So at best, you might be able to wedge one in there, but even that doesn't stay so well. So let's move these off to the side. So I've got two other figures from the line. This is also another one of the translucent ones. This one is a very top-notch figure. I believe it's the main character or mech, whatever these entities are actually supposed to be in the game. And then this guy. And they all have different stands, which is kind of strange because it would be nice if they sort of kept some sort of unifying look between them. Even if they're interlocking, just something about them that would make them the same. I would say out of these stands, this one's probably the nicest, just because it has this little translucent top in here with the silver underneath it. That's a nice design. However, this one's probably the most stable, best stand out of the bunch. But yeah, three designs. Out of all of them, this one is not translucent. I know there was a second version of this one. I do not know if it Well, it was not translucent, but I don't know if they ever actually released a translucent one. These were distributed by Diamond. So these two I actually found in comic shops. They come with tons of accessories. They actually have a thicker peg. And you can see here it's kind of fused. But yeah, if you look at the size of this one versus the size of this one, you can see how this one's going to be a bit weaker. And even, I mean, this doesn't feel nearly as solid as this one does. But these also do tend to stick, but not to the same extent. But you do, you know, I've not touched this figure for a couple years, but it's still pretty good. But they do all have the sort of the same drawback. Nicely sculpted, very dynamic. These are more posable. However, the way he does his joints and the ankles, they're not great standing figures. They got to be on the stands, but they do produce these really nice dynamic poses. So anyway, there's Cypher. If you do see him, you might see him on eBay, or her. I'm not actually sure what it's supposed to be. Poseability, I would give, it's not very good, just because of all these spikes poking off of it. Plastic quality, maybe with a hairdryer or something, you can maybe get some move, but you're going to run a risk of finding one that will be delivered broken. It might not be broken when it leaves the sender, but you don't know if it's going to make it through the mail all the way to you. They are somewhat repairable if you are a do-it-yourself person. I don't know if I would suggest hunting them down, or at least this particular one. It is a cool design. At the very worst, it's a statue. But anyway, that's my thoughts on it. It's another Rush review. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I've got more of these coming up, and we'll see you all next time.